Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, we're continuing our series of shirim on the Torah of recovery with the light revealed. And what we're going to try and do is to connect the light of Parshas Behar with the light of Lag BaOmer, in the sense that Lag BaOmer this year is an extension of Shabbos itself. Because ultimately, when Shabbos and Motzei Shabbos represent two different lights, we come to understand that really they're part and parcel of the very same light. And so in this year where Parshas Behar and the light of Rashbi connect so deeply, specifically by way of that connective device, that miraculous connective device called Motzei Shabbos, we're going to try and understand a little bit of the connection between Behar, Lag BaOmer, and specifically this point of connectivity between Shabbos and Lag BaOmer, which is going to be Motzei Shabbos itself. Now, one of the things in this week's Parsha is the encounter with Shmita, is the encounter with the call for an individual working in the field, engaged with their own power structure, engaged with their own positioning and situatedness within this world. The effort for the sake of a result, the toil for the sake of bringing in that which is necessary, human activity, the most activity-oriented activity imaginable, working the field, cultivating, the original form of work as prescribed onto Adam HaRishon. And in that place, what a person does for 6 years, in accordance with the 6 midos of the self that are graspable, a person engages in the work of self, a person engages in the activity of their hands, Ma'aseh Yadeinu Konanehu. A person engages with Bechira Chavshis by acting and choosing to engage in our behaviors for the purposeful and laborious process towards which we will benefit from the fruits of our labor. And in that place, the self descends into the thickness, the six-part nature of it, which is the 6 times 6, all of the midos, the 7 times 7, those 7 midos of the self, which are magnified upon themselves, revealing the work of Sfiras HaOmer, where we're really working through, feeling that it is the work that we're doing. I'm cultivating the field. And then the Torah comes to say that on the 7th year, you have to relinquish control. You have to give in to the powerlessness of it all, and you have to sustain, you have to remove yourself from engaging, and you have to act in a state of bittul. You have to stop trying to actively perform or create the labor necessary for the fruits of your labor, but rather you have to engage in a process of cessation of work, a secret of Shabbos of the land. And in the face of this radical leap of faith into the place of powerlessness, where the work of my hand is no longer the thing that's going to protect me, or the efforts and the knowledge that I have is no longer going to be the thing that continues to give me the ground to stand upon. So in that place, it's very natural for the individual, for the neshama, to encounter a profound existential quandary of the suffix and the awareness of self and its bareness and the responsibility of living in a place of complete and utter surrender. And in that place, one of the most natural things that awakens within a person's mind is anxiety, is daiga, is worry about the future. And so we see very naturally that when speaking about the problems that are inherent, or the fears inherent within Shmita, so we see that the Torah later on describes it preempts the question that Klal Yisrael are going to ask, V'chi yomer, chi toimar, and if you're going to come and say, Ma noichal, b'yom hashvius, what are you going to eat on the 7th year? And the Torah goes on to describe how a person should ultimately learn to cultivate the faith of Shmita. And so we see that inherent within the Shmita response, the power giving birth to powerlessness, being in control, moving into the place of relinquishing control. In that place, the awakening takes place, and it creates the anxiety of, what am I going to eat on the 7th year? And all of the Meforshim seem to ask a question, ultimately, on this anxious rumination of Klal Yisrael, of what will I eat on the 7th year? Because ultimately, the rule of Shmita is that I can't work in the 7th year. And therefore, I have already prepared the necessary amount of produce for myself in the 6th year. So the 7th year is not my concern. The 7th year is not my concern. My concern is not with regards to what I'm going to partake of in the 7th year. I've prepared, I've done what I could. My power and my control and my placement in this world as a laboring creature, all of those things are still operant. But rather, it's specifically the 8th year that a person has to be concerned about. Because by cessation of activity on the 7th year, it's the 8th year that's going to suffer. And the Meforshim point out, each of them in their own way, that really what it's saying is that on the 7th year, we're going to say, what are we going to eat on the 8th year? And so it's that same worry, but transplanted into the place where it makes temporal sense that in the seventh year, through the act of cessation from activity, now I'm going to be left wondering and worrying about what I'm going to partake of in the eighth year. One of the elements that I believe comes out most acutely in this, and this is a delicate point, is that it makes sense that in the seventh year, when there's a real and present concern, that a person is going to be worried about the eighth year. It's okay to be worried. And it's reasonable to be worried about reasonable things, about things that appear real, about things that are real. Fear is a natural thing. And their clear and present danger of not having something in the seventh year where I'm sitting idly and I'm not engaged in my work. So on the eighth year, I have to really be oriented towards what's going to be. What's going to be when the food dries up? What's going to be when it's not there anymore? But what human beings do, and what Nishmas Yisrael does, is instead of being concerned about the real fear that emerges in the seventh year for the eighth year, we preempt it. We preempt it. We draw it into our lives through an act of anticipatory dread over a fear that has not yet even manifested as an actual possibility. Because instead of being in the seventh year, which would be reasonable to be afraid about the eighth year, we find ourselves in the sixth year being worried about what's going to happen in the seventh year, in spite of the fact that there's no reality in which the effects of not working on the seventh year are going to affect the produce of the seventh year. That fear, that natural fear, which is oriented towards an actual object, we transplant it and we abstract it back to a place of anxiety, which is not based on anything in particular because it's an empty energy that can shapeshift in accordance with whatever the mood of the moment is. And we take a natural fear that will emerge in the future and we preemptively experience it. And we double down the process of having to live in that fear, only now it's an anxiety because there's nothing that we can do about it. So the Torah is hinting to a very, very powerful and natural human tendency that, yes, it might make sense for me to worry about the eighth year and the seventh year, but because there's a reasonable fear that might emerge in the future, I now abstract that and I draw down through an act of anticipatory dread an anxiety and an anxious worrying that is now taking place prior to its allotted time, worrying about nothing. My worry in the sixth year for the seventh year has absolutely no impact on what's going to happen to me in the eighth year. But because of the abstraction of the actual fear and the transformation of it into the empty kind of real possibilities of anxiety that can express itself anywhere, so now I'm stuck worrying about it also in the sixth year. And this notion of the anxiety of there's something that might go away at a certain point, but now I'm going to start worrying about it going away even before I have a reasonable reason to think that it's going to go away. That anticipatory dread, that emergence of anxiety that we've spoken about in the past, is a very difficult feeling for a person to have. It's a very difficult feeling for a person to have, and it's why specifically there the Torah is calling out to us to place ourselves in a process of faith, to be aware of the fact that, yes, something might emerge. There's going to be an eighth year where I have to worry about what's going to be on the eighth year, but when I stand in the sixth year, I don't have to worry about it yet. There's nothing I can do. There's nothing I can do right now. And the promise that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us, as the Ramban points out, is that the promise of Shmita is that the preparation of the sixth year is going to be enough to maintain that which is going to be needed in the eighth year. Meaning to say that once I accept, Rabbeinu Shalom, that I'm not in control, and there's going to be a time where there's an actual fear, there's going to be an eighth year, but here I am in the sixth year, even prior to actually having a reason to be afraid, and I'm feeling all sorts of anxiety. If I recognize that that's where the Torah is telling me to have my trust, that's where the Torah is teaching me to have my bitachon. The bitachon needed for the seventh year to the eighth year is a superhuman power. That's the nace that HaKadosh Baruch Hu creates. But the Torah whispering us not to worry is speaking to the worry that emerges in the sixth year for the seventh year, which is really just the fear of the seventh year for the eighth year. It's the preemptive form of worrying, that preemptive anticipatory dread that puts us in a place of loss even prior to the necessity of experiencing loss, and it takes us out of the moment. And the Torah HaKadosh is telling us through the secret of Shmita to find it there, to find it there, to find calmness, to find the emunah, to find the bitachon. In that place where we're aware that this will not last forever, I'm aware that there's something that's going to break it apart at the end. I'm aware that it's going to fall apart. But it's not yet. It's not yet. I don't have to worry about it yet. I don't have to worry about it yet. and sweetening that tendency to worry through that anticipatory dread about some emergent fear that might be real or might not be real, I have to learn how to be calm and to calm down that anticipatory dread and to trust in the process and the nisim and the miracles that Hashem reveals through the secret of Shmita. And this is the aspect of ma Shmita, ma inyan Shmita etzel Har Sinai. Behar, we're learning about Har Sinai, we're learning about the receptivity of the Torah, we're learning about what it means to receive from that which comes above us, to live with a mindset of bittul, to let go of the wheel so intensely, and to believe that we are passengers that are being driven. We are the Merkava for the Shechina Kavyachol. We are being driven by the Rabbeinu Shalom rather than us driving the Rabbeinu Shalom. When a person comes into that place, when a person comes into that place of Har Sinai, a person now understands Ma Inyan Shmita Eitzel Har Sinai, because the Torah Hakadosha is this very same thing. When Moshe Rabbeinu goes up to Har Sinai, when we're reading the narrative, we are already aware of what's going to happen after. We're already aware that it's going to break. We're already aware that those Luchos Rishonos are going to break. We're already aware of the fact that we're going to need a Luchos Shnios and that there's going to be a Chet HaEgel and all of these different things. And it would be so reasonable for the mindset of the Torah, like the Malachim were trying to claim, don't give them the Torah because the Torah is going to be an ugly book, God forbid, if you give it to them, because it's going to be filled with mistakes and mishaps and failures and points of disappearance and death and fear, etc., etc. And what HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals to us, and what he reveals to Moshe Rabbeinu, and what he reveals to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and what he reveals through them, is that it's specifically from that awareness that things are going to fall apart, that yet nevertheless I will persist in the courage and the tkifus of doing the thing right now in the best way that I can do, in spite of the fact that it might not last forever. That's the secret of Kabbalah Satorah. That's the secret of Ma Inyan Shmita Eitzel Har Sinai. That just as by Shmita we have to calm ourselves from that anticipatory dread over the fact that some real fear of failure might actually emerge in the future, and I have to find trust right here, right now. So too, when it comes to the Torah, a person has to be aware of the fact that Ein Adam Oimed Al Divrei Torah Ela Im Kein Nichshel Bahem. That the prerequisite for standing upon Divrei Torah is the awareness that I will fall away from my graspability of the Torah. As Chazal tell us, Bina Miklal Torah, if a person has an element of understanding, the implication is that they're moving out of a place of misunderstanding. That Haraya Michshala, this is the Michshala, this is the Torah that is something that trips us up, and that being tripped up is the very prerequisite for me to learn how to be calm prior to being tripped up. I know that something is going to fall apart in the future. I'll deal with that then. I'll deal with that then. The luchos will break. Okay, what does that have to do with receiving the luchos right now? The fact that something might not go as well as I want it to go for as long as I want it to go, what does that stop me from doing it right now in this moment? Because one moment is nitzchi. And it's specifically where the Torah is whispering to us to not be afraid. Don't make ourselves afraid. Lo yispachid klal, don't make yourself afraid. There's natural fear, there's clear fear in this world, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu has placed that sensor within the self to orient ourselves to incoming dangers and concerns, and to act in accordance with the limits of our Bechira and our Shtadlis and the interconnection between the Yediyah and the Bitachon. But that's for when there's something to do. But prior to there being something to do, prior to the actual fear emerging, prior to that 8th year to worry in the 6th year for the 8th year and to transform the certainty of the 7th year into a doubtful space because of your anxiety, that's where the Torah is teaching us the secret of Shmita, because that's the Kli Roi to receive the Torah. That's Ma Inyan Shmita Eitzel Har Sinai, that both of them are teaching us how to cultivate ourselves to being present with the thing as it exists right here, right now, in spite of the fact that through our future orientation, our prophetic tales, and the tales that we tell ourselves and our self-fulfilling prophecies, things are going to fall apart in the end. So I might as well not grasp it now. The Torah and Shmita are coming to teach us that no, it's specifically there that a person has to learn to be okay. To be okay when one is okay, instead of worrying about when I'm not going to be okay and making myself not okay. That's the secret of Shmita. The secret of Shmita is calming the nerves and not allowing oneself to fall into that anticipatory dread, that tells me that because something is going to fall apart in the future, I might as well make it fall apart right now. And this is the inyan of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. The entire process of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the entire purpose of Pnimius HaTorah is to come to calm this place, is to come to be Megala, the light of Bitachon. The entire day of Lag BaOmer, the entire light of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is about cultivating Bitachon. Bitachon is the trust that I create for myself, not a reasonable trust that is in accordance with what the reality external to me tells me. Because in external reality, there's nothing to necessarily trust whatsoever. Toila Eretz Al Blima, everything is random. Everything is a Megillas Esther. Everything is with random precision. Everything is in that place of tzidchoska tzedek, mishpatecha time rabba, that place of the unfathomability of the way that the Rebbeinu Shalom runs the Welt, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the Welt in the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the Welt. And so to demand some reasonability at the core of our bitachon is a difficult place to start from sometimes. And therefore, what the secret of bitachon is, as we understood in the Ma'aseh bitachon and the bitachon of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh, and the bitachon that comes with the bittul, that secret of Reshad Lois Yada, of the yichud of Aniva Ayin, of the self and nothingness at once. Bitachon comes from the creation of a safe space, in spite of the fact that I know that there's something that might be knocking at the door a minute later. In spite of the fact that I know that there's real fears in the world, that there's loss in this world, that there's things that fall apart, and sometimes the center appears to not to be able to hold. But who said I should suffer from that reality preemptively? Who told me that I have a value of worrying even before there's a necessity of worrying? And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said this when they said that Asida Torah Lishkach Yisrael, that the Torah is going to be forgotten. If we know that the Torah is going to be forgotten, what that tells us is that the original experiment doesn't work. The original experiment doesn't work. The original experiment, the giving of the Torah, for the perpetual nitzchius of the unfolding of that Torah means zechira tamid, being remembered always. Being remembered always. Being remembered because remembrance is alive. Memory is when something is alive. Even something dead can be remembered and it comes to life. And so the fear was that the Torah is going to die, God forbid, that it's going to be forgotten. Tishkach kemeis min halev, it'll be forgotten like the dead from the heart. And it's specifically there that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai comes to say, Ki loy tishkach mi pizaro. It will not be forgotten. How? Why? We don't have to know that. It will continue to express itself. It might be split up, it might be splintered, but nevertheless, it will not be forgotten. So don't preemptively claim that the Torah is going to be forgotten and live as if the Torah is going to be forgotten simply because you have some notion that the Torah stands to be forgotten in the future. Kiloi tishkach mi pizara. Right now, it's not being forgotten. And it's not going to be forgotten then because we're aware that it's right here, right now. And every moment, the person has the ability to grab hold of experience that is trying to be ripped away from them by that anticipatory dread over the fact that I won't have this thing forever, and therefore I might as well not have it at all because the pain is going to be deeper. And herein lies the transformation of this midah, this place, this anxiety, which is necessary in order to benefit from the true potency of what bitachon is, from what's niskala on Lag BaOmer, from that secret of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai coming out and seeing a world that was contaminated with the possibility of death, of safek tumas misa, of that place of safek tumas misa, is that there's a fear of misa and there's the safek tum of misa. The fear of misa is the grappling of the human being with their mortality, the grappling of the human being with the real fears in life. And the Torah gives us ways to deal with that. But a safek tumas misa is where I don't know if this is an actual concern about something real or it's a preemptive shadow of an anticipatory dread over something that is going to emerge, where I start worrying about the 7th year and the 6th year instead of being afraid in the 7th year for the 8th year, where my fear gives way to an anxiety that is shapeless and therefore it can conform to any circumstance that it's placed in, thereby taking the light of life away from a person, God forbid. It's specifically that momentary awareness of that, oh my God, I can't hold on to this thing forever. It might fall apart and I might as well let go of it right now because it's too overwhelming. It's in that place specifically that Kiloi Tishkach Mi Pizarro takes place. Ashrei ha'oimdim al soidecha, that to stand upon the secret of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is that pivot point where we entrench our feet into the ground and we say, no, just because it's going to end at a certain point does not mean that we cannot benefit from the intensity and the potency of this moment, because Nitzchius is in this moment. And in spite of the fact that something might happen afterwards, right here, right now, Gans Oilam is right here. Because I am the entire world. The entire world is my reflection. Each and every person can say that. Each and every person can say that. Each and every person can say Yachal ani liptar as kol ha'olam min adin, because kol ha'olam kulo lo nivra ela b'shvili. Kol ha'olam kulo lo nivra ela b'shvili, and the inner circle of the people that I orient myself to, the children, the chavraya, the family, whatever it is in a person's life, their rebbe, their talmidim. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is saying that live in the moment. Don't be afraid as a result of what's going to happen and then ruin the present moment as a result of some anticipatory dread over what's going to be. But live right now. Chayim. Chai hachayim. not to get caught up with the externalities of how things look, not to get caught up with the framework or the extended plan of how it assumes that it's going to go, and therefore to lose sight of right here, right now, but rather to dive deeply into the innermost point of that place, which is the chai, which is where a person is alive. The Rebbe was saying that metatron, the concept of this way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world, where it appears that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence is secondary to the governance principle, as if there's some pre-existing set of laws, God forbid, that God has placed into reality. That process of matat and the world of Yitzira and the place of the Malachim, which were so jealous of the Torah, and that place where Achar Elusha ben Avuya goes away because he can't understand how those two things are really unified as one. That place where Rabbi Akiva has to say, don't say water, water. So in this place, the ikar thing is to come to realize that this 6 years, this work, this necessity of working and then losing, that place of metatron, that place of the inner space, that place of the externalized, not the inner space, the externalized way of functioning, where I'm going to lose something and I'm anxious. So we know that there's an externality to that framework of looking, and there's an inner panemius point of that way of looking at reality, of looking at reality as it expresses itself, which is the secret of Metatron. And the secret is expressed in Rebbe Meir, who was walking with Acher, with Elisha ben Avuah. He was walking with his Rebbe, who had come to a mistaken perspective of Koitetz ben Atios, of misunderstanding how it could be that the inevitability of loss and the joy of the present can commingle, can interact together. Instead, Acher Elisha ben Avuah says, Shtei Rishuya same. No, there's absence, there's death, there's things that fall apart, there's things that we've forgotten, and then there's those who pretend that that doesn't exist, but they're two separate things. Shtei Rishuya same. God forbid. That the fact that I have a real fear over what might be lost in the future gives me carte blanche to be anticipatory, dreading every moment of my life. Because if it's going to fall apart at one point, then everything is worthless. That's what Elisha ben Avuah saw. Acher, it was late. He couldn't understand the durational connection between the two stages. And he was koitzitz benetios, because he saw that those two realities of things might fall apart one day versus the ability to be present with something in a moment of joy and fullness. He saw those as two polar opposites. But Rabbi Akiva taught was the secret of al taimri mayim. Don't say it's water, water, but rather they're two parts of the same thing, as we're going to see in a second. Because the awareness of loss, not only does it not stand in opposition to being present in the moment, but it's the very engine that drives the intensity of the moment, as we're going to see. Ki ava, ki aza kamaves ahava, that love is as strong and fierce as death. But Rabbi Meir, Eloi kaid Rabbi Meir Aneni, Eloi kaid Rabbi Meir Aneni, Eloi kaid Rabbi Meir Aneni. Hakol b'cheskasum imad shabal Kadosh Baruch Hu Meir Aneni. We're all blind until the God of Rabbi Meir comes along to illuminate our eyes. Rabbi Meir Ruach Hapeinu Mashiach Hashem, that light of Mashiach. Rabbi Meir comes to teach the secret of how to grapple with that distinction between the inevitability of loss and the possibility of a momentary joy in the present moment, in spite of the tendency to have that anticipatory dread that seeps in from the inevitability of loss into the present moment of presence. And Rabbi Meir, when questioned about how he could grapple with that place of Elisha ben Avuah, so he says, Rimoin matzah, toichai achal, ubaro zarak. I found the pomegranate, I found the rimon, I ate its inside and I threw away its outside, meaning to say that I saw something, I saw where Acher was stuck in, I saw that perspective of the inevitability of loss and that things are going to fall apart, and then in the 8th year I won't have anything, and therefore I have to start worrying in the 6th year, and the anticipatory dread, etc., etc., etc. And I saw how it stands in stark opposition. I saw how it stands in deep separation away from the ability to be present in this moment. And I ate the inside of it and I threw away the outside of it. Rimon matzah, rimon is meron. Rimon is meron. Rimon is meron. Rimon is the notion that in order to be someplace, it has to be alive, it has to be connected, it has to be the way I expect it to be. It has to be the chitzonius adavarim. Toiche ochal, I ate the inside. What's the inside of metatron? Metatron is mem tes, resh vav nun. So when you take the inside letters, it's tes. Rimoin matzah, I found the external letters of rimon. I threw those letters away and I grabbed the innermost letters, which are the tes and the tes. The innermost point, what's tes and the tes? The tes and the tes is 9 and 9, which is 18. That 18, that chai, that ability to be alive right here, right now. Why? Because I'm connected to chai hachayim. because I'm connected to Chai HaChaim, because I'm connected to the Har HaGadol, because I'm connected to Har Sinai, because Moshe Kibel Torah me Har Sinai Masra Yoshua, because of the secret of the Hamshacha and the belief that we have in the tzaddikim and our parents and the people that we placed our trust in. Even when we can't find that stability of being okay in this moment, we place our trust, we borrow from that future light of Emunah that rests deep within our heart. And when a person taps into that Chai HaChaim, that aliveness, we're able to grapple with the distinction about the fact that I'm going to lose something, and on the other hand, I want to be present with it. And this is the secret of Rabbi Shimon saying, "Kilei tishkach mi pizara." This is the secret of the Torah whispering to us the secrets of faith at the heart of that anxiety of the sixth year already, even though I shouldn't be worried until the seventh year. That awareness of being able to receive the Torah in spite of the fact that written within the Torah is our failure to uphold the stricture of the Torah and the descent away from that, and ultimately to come to the deepest secret that it's specifically the breakdown that leads to the breakthrough, which is Asher Shibarta, Asher Koyach Asher Shibarta. And this brings us to the secret unity of Parshas Behar and Lag BaOmer, because what is Motzei Shabbos other than the survival of something even after its death? We learn out the secret of Shabbos, we learn out the secret of Neshama Yisera. Where do we learn out that we have the ability to be present with the moment in front of us on Shabbos? Chazal have the most wonderful way to understand this. Chazal have the most wonderful way to understand this. The only way that we can truly know about Shabbos and the power that we have on Shabbos is the secret of Vayinafash. Now the pasuk says Shabbos Vayinafash, that Shabbos came and there was rest. What's Vayinafash? It's a compound word of Vay Nefesh, woe to my soul. Because when a person feels the beginningness of Shabbos, what happens is they suddenly feel an anticipatory dread and terror over the fact that Kevan Shashavas Vayav the Nefesh, Shabbos is going to end, and I'm going to lose my Neshama Yisera. And Mamela, the only way that I know that I have a Neshama Yisera, the only way that I know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving me an extra strength of hope and continuity even when I don't have it, is by dint of the fact that I'm operating with an anticipatory dread over the fact that it's going to depart. Meaning to say that Ma inyan Shmita, which is the Indian of Shabbos, Eitzel Har Sinai, which is the Torah, which is the Indian of Shabbos as well, it's the reality that we're transforming that difficult thing that the Torah is warning us against. Don't become anticipatorily anxious over things that might take place in the future. Live life right now. How is it not a stira? It's not a stira because that awareness of transiency and temporality and the fact that things don't last forever is in truth the very engine that drives the inner connectivity to that thing in this moment. Because if I don't know with certainty how long something is going to last, I have to throw myself with absolute sincerity into this moment, to the secret of Olamecha Tira B'chayecha, of beholding eternity in a minute, of beholding eternity in a minute, in a second, in a drop of time. Hayoimim b'kolo tishma'u. Hatoifes chelik min etzem toifes etzem kulo. And that power of Shabbos emerges specifically out of the anticipatory dread over the loss of Shabbos, which forces me to throw myself into Shabbos with the utmost ferocity. As Rav Hutner describes so beautifully at the end of the Ma'amarim on Purim, that B'shav Galavata Teshabchem, that it's specifically the raging of the waves that persist in spite of the fact that they know that they will break on the whole, in spite of the fact that they know that they will fail in their attempt to surge forth and overtake the boundaries set by the land itself. Nevertheless, it's that specific awareness of eventual surrender and defeat that initiates a deeper strength to throw themselves with more intensity and more ferocity in the here and the now, and that's what Purim is, and that's where the waves gain their strength from. And that's the light of Shabbos. And so Motzei Shabbos reveals to us, Motzei Shabbos, the awareness that Lag BaOmer is on Motzei Shabbos has the tendency to take a person out of Shabbos. Because if I'm anticipating this time after Shabbos of Motzei Shabbos, where I'll finally connect to Lag BaOmer, then I'm not in Shabbos. But when I become aware of the fact that the boundary between Shabbos and after Shabbos is blurred this year in the light of Rabbi Shimon's light, which is teaching us how to be present with something in spite of the fact that it will eventually depart from us. And not only that, but that awareness is ultimately the driving force between our love and connectivity to that thing. This year we'll be able to not only experience Shabbos and the secret of Shmita, of not worrying about what's going to happen after Shabbos, but we'll also be able to come to terms with the fact that Motzei Shabbos is not the death of Shabbos, but rather it's the furthering of the light of Shabbos. It's the Chai HaChaim, it's the revelation that Shabbos survives its death, as the Rebbe points out from the Sfardim Mekubalim, that in truth, Atachin and Tanu is Melashon Chasana, because it's specifically after Shabbos where we believe and we come to that place of realizing that there's an irreducible part of Shabbos that continues to exist in spite of Shabbos's departure. That's the secret of the anticipatory dread that gives birth to the deeper ability to hold on to what I have in this moment. And Lepella, look at what Rabbi Nachman says about the light of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in the 126th teaching. BaZohar, in the book of the Zohar, in the book of Rabbi Shimon, in the book of our lives, Bakama Makomos, in numerous places, Sheshibchu HaChavrayas, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, that the Chavraya Kadisha praised Rabbi Shimon, and they're standing there in front of Rabbi Shimon, and they're ready to receive teachings from Rabbi Shimon. Isa, it says, Vai Lidara Katistalek, woe to the generation in which this tzaddik departs. That anticipatory dread over the fact that he's going to depart. It's the same aspect of what happens on Shabbos, where Kevan Shabbos Vayav the Nefesh, because we become aware of the fact that Shabbos is going to depart, we begin to experience the light of Shabbos with more intensity. The same thing is happening by Rabbi Shimon. The moment Rabbi Shimon starts to talk, the moment the Chavraya Kadisha start crying out of woe to us that we've lost Rabbi Shimon, what do you mean? He's standing right in front of you. Elama, the awareness of how much they loved Rabbi Shimon, how much they needed those drops of Torah, those drops of light, that expression of Chai HaChayim, of Chayim ad Oilam, of Rimon Matzah Toichal Achar, Baro Zarak. I threw out the externalities and I grabbed hold of the innermost point of Chai HaChayim, which reveals that everything is unified. The loss and the gains, the absence and the presence, all of it is expressive. Va'i galina, va'i loy galina. Both revealing and concealing, both of them are fundamental to the revelation of a Kadosh Baruch Hu's presence in our lives. The awareness of transiency and that transiency giving birth to the newly found intensity of throwing ourselves with Mesiras Nefesh into the moment itself. Hainu, says Rabbi Nachman, Shemach Mazgoyedel Hatainug Shel HaNefesh Yisera Shabbat B'Shabbos. As a result of the intensification of pleasure that comes about with the extension of the soul as it is expressed on Shabbos, Al-Kain Matchilim Tekef Lehitkat-Geya Luhista'er Al Avedas HaNefesh B'Motzei Shabbos. Immediately, without duration, immediately they began to be pained by the fact that they were going to lose that Nefesh when Motzei Shabbos came, meaning taking the fear and the danger of the anticipatory dread and transforming it into a spiritual tool, which is the awareness of transiency. Not only should I not be afraid of it, but rather I should force it to re-engage me with the essence of things. The love that I have for Shabbos gives birth to the awareness of, oh my God, it won't last forever. And that forces me to dive down deep into it with kisufin. Kain ha-chavraya, so to the chavraya of Rabbi Shimon. As a result of the greatness of the pleasures and the playfulness and the expansivity and lightness of the self as it encounters the refinement and the redemptive elements of Torah, Shekiblu mirabam, what they received from Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Al-Kain Teikef umiyad hitchilul hitka'ageya. Immediately, even when we were experiencing the thing itself, they were crying out as a result of the fact that this thing will go away, but the fear over the thing going away did not force them out of the moment, but rather it intensified their presence in the moment. V'Allah alibam sar histalkus shilahem. And the pain over his eventual departure entered into their heart to create that shuka, that aza kamavas ahava, that aza kamavas ahava, that aza kamavas ahava. And that's the secret. That's the secret of Lag BaOmer. The secret of Lag BaOmer is the secret of Kiloi Tishkach Mi Pizaro. Just because it might be forgotten doesn't mean you have to be the one to forget it right now. Do not allow the anticipatory anxiety over some eventual reality or realistic fear to pollute the ability to be present in things when they are happening, because it's only when we're present in things as they are happening in the best way that we can be that we have any fighting chance of grappling with the moments as they arrive. So do not take a doubled portion of the concerns. Live with regular, natural fears. It's good to live with a fear that can be addressed. It's good to be careful in every area that a person can be careful from. But that does not mean that we have to live under a cloud of anticipatory dread, which leads me to the painful process of that self-fulfilling prophecy that if I'm going to lose it anyway, instead of enjoying it and worrying about when it's going to end, I might as well break it on my own so as to at least relinquish that concern. And we know where that goes. We know that Hashem took nevuah, took prophecy from the prophets, and he gave it to the shaitim. He gave it to those people who are meshaitet b'machshavtam, the ruminations and thoughts, meaning to say that Hashem took prophecy from the prophets and he gave over self-fulfilling prophecies to those who carry anxiety within their minds. Because the anxious pressure of when is something bad going to happen leads the person to create some element of destruction in the here and now so that they don't have to worry about the when anymore. It's easier to deal with the shoe dropping, God forbid, than it is to worry about when is the shoe going to drop. And that's the danger of that anticipatory anxiety that the Torah is warning us against. Don't start worrying about the 8th year. Don't start worrying about the 7th year when in truth you should just be worrying about the 8th year. Don't allow that anticipatory dread to seep into your island of calmness and to ruin things for you. You can live in the moment. And the same is true with regards to Har Sinai. The same is true with regards to the receiving of the Torah, that the wisdom, the insight that we receive in our lives, the moment of clarity, they won't last forever. And that doesn't mean that we shouldn't partake in the presence of that moment as it exists right now, as it's revealed right now. That's exactly how it's supposed to be. That's exactly how it's supposed to be. That's what leads us to understand Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai saying just because it might be forgotten doesn't mean that you have the right to try and forget it right here, right now. Remember as much as you can right here and right now. Engage in the moment in spite of the moment ending and allow it to transform the transiency of the moment into the intensification. Throw yourself with ferocity into it. And the secret of Azak Mavas Ahava, and the secret of Motzei Shabbos, and the secret of dancing for the Torah of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, dancing for the Torah of Mashiach, of that Torah that gives us permission to be comfortable in spite of the fact that we sometimes feel that we have all of these reasons to be uncomfortable, which is the secret of living in a place of bitachon, the secret of living in a place of calmness, the secret of learning how to quell the natural anxiety that emerges at any sight of eventual breakdown so as to take away any possibility of functioning. Allow myself to enjoy the meal while I'm eating the meal. Allow myself to enjoy today instead of worrying about what tomorrow is going to bring, because tomorrow is an entirely new reality, because everything is contained in the right here and the right now. And what happens next is what happens next, but it doesn't change what's happening right here and right now. You see this with the Chavraya Kadisha. Every time a Torah came out, every time a Chiddush came out, they says, oh my God, if I had only come down into the world to hear this, it would have been enough. On the one hand, it would have been enough. On the other hand, it's not enough. Why? Because in this moment, it's enough. In accordance with the next moment, it's not enough. Because this moment had its Torah, and the next moment needs to have its Torah. And if the Torah of tomorrow is going to be a Torah of loss, that says nothing about the Torah of having right here and right now. And that's the secret of the Chavraya Kadisha. They say, Vai ledara the Salek Hai Butsina, woe to the generation that loses this, because the awareness of the intensity and the beauty and the sublimity, the sublime nature of connecting to that innermost point in our minds and heart and feeling okay, the ability to rely upon Rabbi Shimon. That moment is nitzchi. That moment is nitzchi. It's kedai to come down into this world for 100 years to experience, or 120 years to experience that moment. And that's the secret of the Hilula of Bar Yochai, specifically on the day of his Histalkus, on the day of his departure. We celebrate his Torah because the Gan secret of Rashbi, the Gan's secret of the Zohar, the Gan's secret of recovery, the Gan's secret of being okay in spite of the fact that we know that it might not be okay in the next moment. The Gan's secret is learning how to draw down bitachon in the here and now and realizing that Rebbeinu Shloim, I am here, you are here, everything is good. Kedai lismoch, there's enough to rely upon to find joy. Kedai lismoch, to find simcha, to find comfort, to find ease, to find the moment of clarity, to taste for a moment the nitzchias, and Be'ezras Hashem will be zocha to continue growing and going up and illuminating ourselves in the world, and illuminating to understand that that leads to a next stage of darkness in relationship to the higher stage of illumination, and that it's a process of up and down, but it's never actually going down. It's always climbing upwards, but it's the up and down of climbing upwards, like a conflagration, like a flame that sometimes might be drawn back down to its source, but only to express itself with more ferocity. Be'ezras Hashem.